Good morning and welcome to another episode of Wild and Wise. I'm your host, Alex Ott, and I'm here with Katie. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Tell the audience a little bit more about who you are, where you live, and what you do.
Sure. So, my name's Katie and I'm Australian, but I live in Edinburgh in Scotland. So, for some reason, I decided to trade the sun for just permanent coldness. Don't ask me why. Anyway, but I am an NLP practitioner, a hypnotherapist, and a subconscious breakthrough coach. So, essentially, what I do is I help people rewire their subconscious mind because 95% of what we do, how we feel, what we believe is all down to our subconscious blueprint. And so, if we have a recurring pattern, if we have something that we keep doing, maybe we keep self sabotaging, we're people pleasing, being a perfectionist, and it's holding us back in life, or maybe we keep getting into relationships with the wrong people,
Mhm.
or we keep stunting our growth, then usually it's because of our subconscious mind. And I help people rewire their minds so that they can get rid of all that and create new neural pathways and get what they want out of life.
So beautiful. I have so much, like immediately when you were saying this, I have so many different questions because I was at a point where talk therapy started to feel like it wasn't doing what it needed to do for me. And I had a girlfriend refer me to someone that does exactly what you do here in San Diego. And I went to one class and I left, and it was a class versus the one-on-one, which maybe you offer both, but I was hysterical, like absolutely hysterical. And I don't like getting to a place of hysterics. And so I felt very like, oof, that was too much. But I think what's beautiful is the what really happened was that shift in pathways, that shift in decision making, that ability to quite literally typically go down one route in your brain and sort of open this new opportunity for you to think differently. When people come to you, how do you compare the difference between talk therapy, other therapies, and what you do?
I'm so glad you asked this question because I speak about talk therapy a lot and I'm a huge believer in it. But I think talk therapy is amazing for building awareness
Mm,
and looking at your life, what you do, things that have happened in your life, and making sense of it, reframing it, giving you perspective, making you aware of things that you might not have been aware of in the past.
mhm,
Maybe if there's like any self-destructive behaviors or, anything that you want. I think it's great to have that sounding board, having someone be a mirror and reflect that back to you. And I think that's where talk therapy is amazing. And I've had talk therapy and it was life changing for me. But what I tend to find is people get to a point, like you described, when they are having talk therapy and they're self aware and they know their patterns, they know their triggers, they know a lot about themselves, but they want to create real lasting change in their life. And
mm,
you can't necessarily talk your way out of your triggers and you can't necessarily talk your way out of repeating old patterns of behavior. Because, like I mentioned when I first spoke about what I do, it really comes down to our subconscious mind. Our
mhm,
subconscious is all about how we feel and what we believe. And so, for example, if you are someone that is afraid of commitment, you can be very aware that you're afraid of commitment. But as soon as you get close to somebody, your instinct will be to run. As soon as you feel vulnerable, your instinct will be to run. It doesn't
mhm.
matter how aware you are of that, you want to do that. So if you want to create change in your life, you really need to work on your subconscious. And so that's where I come in. So a lot of the people that do come to work with me sound very similar to what you experienced, is that they're aware and they're like, okay, I feel like I've got what I can out of talk therapy, but I want to really see some massive shifts and I want to really change how I act and also how I feel. Because we
Mhm.
can know that we're not enough, for example. We can be like, oh, I really feel like I'm not enough. But we need to change that so that you start behaving differently and you can start having different relationships and you can start doing better in your business and not doubting yourself all the time, because
Mhm.
awareness is great to a point, and after
Yeah,
that point it becomes a little bit pointless if I'm honest.
touche.
If you can't
No, I
change it, you'd
agree.
almost rather
Yeah,
be unaware.
yeah, yeah. And I would think that in some ways you can be aware and maybe make a shift here, make a shift there, but if it's sort of living within you subconsciously and you're not shifting that, you're not on the path to that long-term change like you talked about. So that's such a great point. I think a lot of people are hesitant when they see this because at least, talking to my girlfriend who also owns something similar, in kind of not understanding, sort of these typical expectations of human change. It's twofold for me. One is this is sort of a new industry, a new way of doing things. It's been around for a long time, but I think its relevancy or what you're doing is really pioneering in a lot of ways. And on the other hand, it's a wellness revolution, and I think people are willing to try everything. What have you sort of seen on the people that are either, well, you're not a doctor, or, kind of taking this traditional, well, like, how does this all work? And this hesitancy over, like, I'm ready to take control of my life. Let's fucking do this thing. Like, where do you see the balance when people come to you, or just kind of in general and feedback? Because I know you have a lot of followers. You have an incredible Instagram. Tell me a little bit more about how you're seeing the world see you.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I recently started going to more in-person networking events last year, and they're quite corporate. And I find that especially people, I mean, I'm in my own little echo chamber on Instagram and TikTok where it's like very big to talk about the subconscious mind and mindset. And then you kind of get into different environments, and I am met with a lot of, it's really interesting. I'm sort of met with two camps of people that are just like, wow, that's so interesting. And they're really curious and they really open up to me. And then some people are like, what? And they seem very skeptical and very, I do tend to find those people tend to be a bit more analytical.
Yes, of
And so
course.
they think that hypnotherapy is like woo woo, especially I think they think that, I mean, we see in the media, you're going to clock like a chicken, or I'm going to make you eat an onion or something like that. And I think that's what people's first instincts are when they think of hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting seeing the different responses, but I do find that people are becoming much more open to it. And if you give real world examples, for example, athletes, professional athletes, Olympians use hypnotherapy, they use visualization all the time and they take it really seriously. So I think when you explain to people that actually it's more common and more used than they might think,
Right.
I've had therapists tell me that they often refer their clients to hypnotherapy, and it's something that therapists are on board with, most of them anyway. And so
Right.
it is fascinating seeing the difference between the two, but I'm never going to try and like convince somebody, but
Sure.
if someone is like ready for it and they're like, I'm open to this, I want to see change, then they're
Mm-hmm.
usually pretty open to it.
And I feel like that approach has to be the way that any business owner approaches business. I think you just get to a certain point in your career where you're not going to convince somebody to work with you, no matter if it's in the wellness field, in my industry of creative, if I'm not going to beg someone to work for me. And I think I was just speaking on a panel last night where she was referral only. They don't do advertising, which is pretty non-traditional in my opinion. We're all trying to get the word out there and make money and grow our business. And I thought it was interesting that she did that, but she said that, she says no to lots of those referrals. I mean, she's clearly in like a wonderful place in her business to be able to do that. And so it's really interesting, this idea as women and business owners, to be able to get to a point where you are so sure about your path, you're sure about your offerings and its impact, that you're not going to have to try to convince someone to sign up for a package, or convince someone that this is the right PR firm or social media firm for them. Let's kind of shift a little bit away from the practice of what you do. I want to dive into that, but like, tell me about this business and how it evolved, like who you are as a woman and where this kind of grew, not only to like how this practice impacts you, but I want to know more about like the business side. Like, how did you go from, finding this, discovering this, whatever that may be, into getting it out there, building your brand? I want to kind of dive into that portion of it.
Sure. And my career trajectory is all over the place, to be honest. I started out as a teacher, and I was actually an early years teacher, so I taught like people in, kindergarten age. And I did that for about 5 years. And to be honest, most of the way through my degree, and then in the first few years of me being a teacher, I was like, this isn't for me, but I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of kept at it. And then I was like, do you know what? I want to get into marketing and sales. And so that's what I did. I ended up going into marketing and sales, and I did that for a few years. Then I started my own business doing social media management, and that's when I discovered the coaching space. So it all just sort of had this little it was a bit of a windy path, but I got
Mm-hmm.
there nonetheless. I'd
Yeah.
also always been fascinated by psychology, personal development, self-development, therapy. I've always found that very, very interesting. And it was when I started doing social media management, and then eventually I pivoted into doing marketing and sales coaching, that I discovered NLP. There's lots of links between sales and NLP. In fact, a lot of people that are in sales have heard about it. And I wanted to train in it, and I just had this natural curiosity for it. So I was like, okay, I think my own clients would really benefit from having some mindset support, because what I did find was a lot of the clients that came to me, I could give them the strategy. I could literally say, this is the steps. This is exactly what you need to do in order to get the next sale or to become more visible, whatever it is that they wanted to achieve. And it was very rarely this strategy that was the thing getting in their way. It was always the mindset behind it.
Oh my
And I found
gosh.
that the clients of
That
mine,
is
the clients of mine that did really well were the ones that believed in themselves, were the ones that failed, got up quickly, kept going. Whereas some people I find would get in constant funks, take everything personally, let perfectionism hold them back. And that's when I trained in NLP and hypnotherapy. And then I just went all in on that because I was just so obsessed with it. So that's how I kind of got to where I did.
I have a client for you. No, it's so true as we manage these things. But I also find it very brave that you are focusing on marketing and social and the strategy. And that's a lot of what we do at Chrome City at my agency. But then you see this sort of need or setback or something holding them, and you decide to then go completely educate yourself on that to give such not only a wide range of offering, but you're changing their lives. And to be frank with you, that's something where like I have a boundary where I'm like, I'm not even trying, girl. If you can't even figure out your own shit, then you best go figure out your shit. Like I'm very
So
like,
fair.
oh my God, please, girl. So it's really beautiful and compassionate that you saw that in your clients as a need and obviously felt drawn to NLP and then decided to really pick that up. How did you then integrate this idea of like full agency and sales strategy and creating the content calendar and diving into the brand with this really other part while they're very connected, but like just even as an offering, like how did you go to market with something like
I definitely struggled a little bit with getting the messaging right for it, but I think a lot of people did realize, not necessarily with the first business coach they hire, but maybe if they've made a few investments, they probably do start to realize, like, I'm holding myself back a little bit. Actually, I've got a few little things that I need to work on. And so I did find that when I spoke to the problems that they were experiencing, and that, okay, yes, they want to make sales and they want to grow their business and scale their business, but they also were struggling with things like self-doubt, with lots of fears coming up, maybe the fear of success, fear of failure, whatever it was. And I had to do a lot of education with my audience around the fact that your subconscious mind will stop you from being more successful. So there was a lot of education around it, but I think especially in the online space, in the online coaching space in particular, people are pretty open to it.
yeah.
So it was quite appealing to a lot of people. I think they had realized by that point, they were like, actually, I kind of need help with both.
You brought up something that I'm writing down so I don't forget. I was speaking on a panel last night, and we talked about the fear of failure versus the fear of success. And it was said that they feel like a lot of people don't talk enough about the fear of success. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Of
Because
course.
that's something I had never even really thought about. I think as somebody who is quite confident and hasn't struggled a whole lot with insecurity, I think anybody who knows me know I kind of like came out of the womb as just sort of like this weird, like I feel like I'm so weird that I've never compared myself to anybody else. I've never, which has given me confidence because I'm like, well, who else would I think I need to be like? But when they said that last night, the fear of success, I thought, oh, that's so interesting because for me personally, I grew my business in Chicago to about 10 staff members and then about 10 freelancers. So we were about 20 strong. And in any world, that is a tremendous feat. And it felt so overwhelming trying to make sure there was enough money coming in to pay an entire staff of 20 a decent, barely decent salary every month, just with me being the only one selling. Felt like it broke my spirit and my soul every month. I was just drained. And so that was clearly living in a state of fear at all times of failing them,
Mm.
failing myself, not putting food on the table. And so because of that, I am like solidly deeply committed to like 3 people and 3 people only. Like we have 3
Mhm.
girls, we are golden, it feels good, we support each other. But when it was said last night, this fear of success, I thought, oh my gosh, I've sort of put myself in such a box because it was so overwhelming 8 years ago. I'm such a different woman now. That have I put myself in a box of just wanting the 3 so that I never have to feel that feeling again? Or am I just wanting a simple life? And because sometimes people are always about the growth, and especially in the coaching world, and you've got
Mhm.
the numbers and the metrics and the KPIs and the P&Ls, and I just have never felt drawn to that. And I feel like I know that what is up here could produce far more than what's happening. But sometimes I wonder, where is the line between just being happy enough with what you got and not needing to have the capitalistic American grow, grow, grow at any cost, versus am I just actually afraid of like what's possible? Do I have a fear of success? So let's dive into a more of like, what does a fear of success look like? And I want to know more so, like, what does that look like with people who are actually really confident? Because I could see how easily it could apply to somebody who's maybe in fear of something great happening to them because they've had it really like a rough go at life, or nothing good has ever happened. It feels like an obvious thing to correlate. But what about people that have really like crushed it and they still have a fear of success?
There's so much good. I feel like we could have like a whole podcast just in what you just spoke about then,
Great.
because
Let's
so
go.
good. But yeah, fear of success is fascinating because I think it's not as obvious as a fear of failure. You hear the word failure and most people want to avoid it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting when people want to avoid their own success. And with your experience that you said with building out that big team in Chicago and finding it so overwhelming and really, really stressful, a lot of people are afraid of that. They're afraid of the overwhelm, the fear of added responsibility. Taking on, for example, some people like retire their partners and then they're like, oh my goodness, now I'm responsible for their income and then my family's, and they really feel the weight of that pressure. And so a lot of people do stop themselves from achieving more growth because they're afraid of what's going to happen on the other side. I also see this a lot with usually under a fear of success comes more fears. So something like fear of judgment. I've had clients that go viral and all they want is to bring more people into their audience, and then they go viral, get one negative comment and they'll delete the post, and that is clearly a fear of success, because when you're more successful, you tend to be more visible and you tend to be more vulnerable to criticism and
Mm-hmm.
feedback and people not agreeing with you. And so
That's
a
real.
lot of
That's
people play
so real.
small. Yeah, absolutely. And in what you were saying at the end there with, people that tend to be more confident, and it's amazing. It sounded like you had that natural confidence within you when you were younger. I definitely didn't. I had to work really hard at becoming more confident. But we're all nuanced and we can be more confident in certain areas. And so, for example, someone might be really confident in the boardroom, but then in their romantic relationships, be a complete hot mess,
Totally.
or vice versa. And we all have certain limits. So and it's all relative as well, isn't it? Because someone could be a multi 7-figure entrepreneur, and to us, or to someone that's, scrambling to get by, where like they're killing it, they're smashing it. But to a billionaire, that's like peanuts. It's nothing to
Right.
them. So
It's
we
all
all have
perspective.
we all have upper limits, and we all, if we want to, can push past them. But we don't have to. And I think going back to what you were talking about in the sense of we are conditioned, especially by capitalist society that we grow up in, to always reach our potential and push, push, push and grow, grow, grow. And I think sometimes it's about having the introspection, or being able to look within and being like, do I want this? Why do I want this?
Yeah.
Rather than just doing what you think you should be doing because everybody else
Yeah.
seems to be doing it. And that's what we're told all day.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was asked last night, have you ever had a coach? And I knew who was in the room. There was some coaches in there. And I think we can talk about also just the volume of coaches in the in the internet and Instagram space, and sort of how you feel about all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be cautious because I respect anyone who started a business. I respect all of that. And it was a hard question to answer because I know I'm just a different kind of person and I don't want to ever sound, I'm not conceited, but I have somehow luckily avoided struggles that people have had. Well, I've had many, many other struggles, being a single mom, you name it, lots, addiction,
Hmm.
things like that. And I think that it's really hard to answer if I've had a mentor, because I kind of have had a hard time navigating who is that right beast for me and where do we, click, and how do you know how to find. So when people are looking for that right coach, person, mentor in general, do you have kind of like a way that people can find their person? Because there is so much volume out there of life coaches, business coaches. And you know what? I feel bad because I do feel like there's this blanket put on them. I've blanketed, where I'm like, oh gosh, it feels a little bit like
Like
a
a pyramid scheme.
scam. Like, and I don't, and it sounds
Yeah.
terrible because I don't want it to have that, but I also want this podcast to be honest in how we can like
Hmm.
decry that connotation. Business coaches focused on financials, focused on your own self, like where do you see this? I mean, but clearly so many people are doing it that there's something to it. So like, let's fucking
Hmm.
unfold all of the coaching business that's online, because it does feel like a money grab sometimes. Other times it feels super genuine. How do you know where to go if anybody's listening and they're kind of stepping into this?
Yeah, I was nodding vigorously whilst you were talking then because I myself have struggled with the coaching industry quite a lot. And in fact, I don't even really like to call, I mentioned I do subconscious breakthrough coaching, but I don't love using the word coach because I hate
Yeah,
all the connotations that come along with it. And I don't
yeah,
tend to love the industry myself, if I'm being completely
yeah,
honest, even though I was one and I definitely fall under that umbrella because I do find it very pyramid schemy.
yeah.
And I personally wouldn't buy services from someone who only speaks about how much money they earn because what even are you doing?
Yeah,
And I just find that doesn't personally speak to me. I want to
right.
know like how you're going to help me, what your business experience is, actual tangible strategies that you use. Whereas I find a lot of people are like, I made this much this month, or look at my bank account, I'm killing it. And I'm like, that's when I feel like it becomes MLM. And that
Hmm.
personally does not speak to me at all. And so I think if you're but they can be incredibly valuable. It just depends on, like any industry, finding the right ones and because there's great journalists and not so great journalists.
Right, right.
There's great teachers and not so great teachers. And I think sometimes it's about finding someone that resonates with you in terms of what they speak about, how they teach. Do they actually
Hmm.
have experience in the industry? I think a lot of people just wake up one day and they're like, I think I'm going to be a business coach. And I'm like, do you have any experience in running a business? Or have you just started an Instagram account and
And it's
made
a
20
bummer
bucks and
because
now you're going to talk about it?
it's a disservice to people that were like, COOs for 20 years and then decided they wanted
Hmm.
to help people. And we just happened to use the name coach, and they have invaluable insight. Or like yourself, you have
Yeah.
invaluable tools in your belt to be able to shift the way people are thinking. How do you think you've been able to set yourself apart from the generality of people in that world? Because I'm not calling you a coach, but I know that there people can think if you're helping another
Mhm.
business person, you're guiding, coaching, there's something around that. So if you
Sure.
lie
Yeah.
somewhere on the spectrum, how do you feel like, what do you attribute your success to, and sort of pushing the noise aside and really staying in your lane and building what you've built?
You kind of just said it there. I think putting the noise aside is important. There was definitely a phase where I felt like I was consuming so much content that I subconsciously felt like I was starting to sound like a lot of the other people. And then I started to feel really disconnected from my business and really quite unhappy in it. And it was in a big funk with it for a while. And I was like, why am I so not excited by what I do anymore? Why am I bored of this? Why am I not feeling I'm not feeling it at all? And then I realized I was like, because I'm not talking about anything that I really care about. I'm starting to sound like other people because that's just the content that I was consuming. And so
Mhm.
I really just did an audit on my values and what I find important and how I love to help people and what I'm really good at. And that's what I speak to. Even though it might not be as sexy as I made 100K in a day, that does sell. And that's why people make lots of money because it's sexy marketing and it
Mhm.
appeals to people. Of course, everyone wants to make 100K in a day, like most who wouldn't really. But
Yeah.
I just feel like being in integrity is really important to me. And for me, that isn't being in integrity. And I actually care a lot more about helping people find confidence and overcome anxiety and, yes, thrive in their business. But it doesn't, for me, I don't want it to be all about money marketing. That
Mhm.
for me was not it. So
Yeah.
I it might not be the sexiest marketing that I use, but I it resonates with me, and then the right people find me and then they want to buy from me, and I'm totally fine with that.
I mean, it's sexy if you wanna be better, you know? I mean, sex even when you say it's
Mhm.
not as sexy, it's like, I mean, is money sexy? I said the word last night, like, for me, I was sitting next to somebody that was very, like, 7-figure, 8-figure, and she was so incredibly smart, and she was
Mhm.
so accomplished. There was not one moment of anything she said that I wasn't, like, impressed. And then it was my turn to talk, and I was like, to these, budding entrepreneurs. And I just said, it's interesting because like we were supposed to bring a cheat code, which there's no such thing as cheat codes in life. And so I said, I did a little cheat code for social media of like ways to stretch content. You can talk about one thing multiple ways, multiple times over and over. And I said, but my other cheat code is like, it's okay to have a business that doesn't bring a ton of money. That's just really for passion. I have two businesses. One is Chrome City. The other is an underground dinner series called The Blank Table. And I said, like, my soul is ignited by food, drink, art, and people coming together. And we pour so much of ourselves into this, but it's not really profitable. And so I was kind of like the anti capitalist in the room where I was like, we work our asses off for this. And I've met incredible clients. I've actually made a lot of money off of it through the people that I've met end up hiring me or the friendships that I've made of people to come, the richness that I feel from that. And it was interesting. I didn't know how it was going to land because the way that the room was talking was very like the coaching world and the Instagram follow for the money. It was a very different world that I'm used to. I'm always with like
Mm,
designers and poets and creatives. So it's so interesting to like have this perspective where I have super wildly creative and very financially successful friends. And then I'm in this room where it's like very pyramid scheme vibes is the feeling I
mm,
got. And so then I think
mhm,
when I went to talk, I was like, I don't know if this is going to land, but you don't always have to chase the dragon. Like sometimes you just got to go for what you really want. And I was, it was like, is this an unpopular opinion? And I got so many messages last night of people being like, thank you so much for saying that because it felt like the energy in the room was like, how to get to 7 figures, your sales funnels, and all these things that I'm like, I so don't do that stuff. And I still get to go to Italy and my kids still go to a really great school and I've got a really nice Audi, but I'm not, going for the gold in that way.
mm.
So I just had to say that as a side because I do think that what you're doing is sexy for the people whose
Thank
soul
you.
is yearning for growth, unfolding, like peeling those layers back, understanding themselves in a world that's so loud with noise about making money. And I just had that
Yeah.
experience last night, so I wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And I think the people that get it. And
Yeah.
you obviously resonated with a lot of people in the room because a lot of people were probably feeling that. They were like, oh my God. And then you spoke and it was probably like a breath of fresh air. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
yeah,
It's just a weird world right now, and it's,
it is.
I think we have to honor art form, and we have to honor people that, I just, like, saw this man that spent 50 years building this thing inside a crater and so that you could feel like you were actually walking into the earth. 50 years of his life, he built this experience in the middle of the desert, and I just thought, that's beautiful. And I used to not. I used to definitely be like, why would somebody do that? But I think as you uncover your soul more, as you, tap into your unconscious, people that dedicate their life to just one simple, wildly complex yet like simple checkbox, it's really become more appealing as I get older, of like just living for the moment, living in a time of being able to offer something for others and not always having to chase that dragon. So I'll
Mhm.
divert, but I wanted when you said self audit, it's something I read about when you answered your questions. You also said it. Can you dive a little bit more into what that looks like? What does that mean? How can someone do that?
Sure. So it's very simple. Whenever I'm feeling off, if I'm in a funk, if I feel drained, then I know that I am out of whack somewhere. So I'm kind of like out of alignment somewhere, usually within my value system. And in NLP, I do this with a lot of my one-on-one clients. On a second call, I usually do a values elicitation, which is where we actually like pull out, okay, like what's important to you, and we tend to find on those calls that the reason why, or one of the reasons why, they have been feeling low in confidence or disconnected in their relationships or disconnected in their business is because they are not living in alignment with their values. Say, for example, connection is like one of their top values, and they are spending all day working from home on a computer and they're not actually getting out and meeting new people. Or they are maybe doing work, because connection is one of my top values. And one of the reasons why I felt so out of alignment in my business was because I was talking a lot about money, and that just didn't really connect with me. Like, I like to talk about money sometimes, but not all the time. I actually really love to connect deeply with other people. And again, that was one of the reasons why I pivoted out of sales and marketing, because for me, deeper connections start with more like emotional conversations. And I love talking about that. And that was really important to me. So if I'm ever feeling a little bit off, a little bit funky, sometimes what I do is I just do a little self check-in and a little energy audit. And I'll look at, okay, like, where am I spending my time? Where am I spending my energy, both mentally and physically? So I'll be like, okay, am I spending too much time alone, or am I spending too much time with other people? Am I spending too much time on my phone? What am I thinking about all the time? Like, what's taking up a lot of my energy? And what I also tend to find happens with me a lot is that when I am in that space, it's because I'm putting too much of my focus on one or two things and I'm not actually dispersing my energy out properly. And that usually looks like I'm not having enough fun, which I know sounds overly simplistic. But
No,
I think
it's
especially if you're a
real.
business owner, yeah, especially as a business
Yeah.
owner, and if you've got a family and like you're looking after children, you don't tend to have much time for things like fun. And so
Something
I
that
think
used to
sometimes it's
come so naturally without thinking about it on a regular basis,
Mhm.
you're now having to actually plan for or think about, or it's wild. Yeah, that's a really great
Yeah,
point.
and doing things like, especially as if you work with a lot of creatives, when was the last time you created something not to monetize it, just to enjoy it and just to have fun with it? And I think
That's
that's so
real.
so important,
That's
because I
cool.
was like that. I'm quite a creative person, but I think I spend so much time like creating like social media or writing emails, and that does require creativity. But then when was the last time I like drew something or went to a pottery
Right.
class, you know?
It's so true. God, that's such a good point. And it is so simple. Like one could read that or hear this and go, well, yeah, I mean, you do need to be
Obviously.
creative. But like when actually creatives in their 30s with children or families or whatever, have you actually painted? Yeah, it's so, so, so true. I mean, I hate to say the silver lining for COVID was I got to do stuff like that again. You know, I
Hmm.
was pulling out my paints and they weren't that great of paintings, but it just felt good to smoke half of a joint and just get out on my patio and get some good music going. And it's I work so hard. I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so I want to talk to you offline more because I feel like what am I holding on to and how can I just release the veil? I wanted to also ask you something else that I had written down that I was thinking about was I don't know if this is happening out in Scotland, but certainly in Southern California, there is a wild rise in these journeys and experiences with sort of an array of hallucinogens guided by sometimes a shaman, sometimes just a leader that for some of my friends has completely changed their lives in the way that they see the world, the way that my friends are talking about it, the way that the trauma has been being peeled away. And I don't know if it's a mixture of like mushrooms, MDMA, and sometimes people say ayahuasca. Others have told me like there's like a white lily tea. I was just wondering because I do feel like as these new modalities become more popular in
Mm,
getting to the core of who we are, that's my correlation between what you're
yeah.
doing and what this is doing for my friends. It's really interesting, and I wanted to see if you had an opinion on it. And if not, then that's okay. Part of me feels like that could really change things. I mean, I can't talk about too much on this because this is a business podcast, but I do find that like mushrooms, for example, like 10 years ago, I wouldn't even think to talk about them. Nobody was doing them. It was like a weird old 90s drug. And now I think, I'm in my late 30s. Most of my friends are in their 40s and 50s. And it is like a regular thing that everyone's doing, talking about. Nobody wants to feel like incredibly baked off of weed or super drunk. There's this diving into this world where people are having these experiences, peeling back the layers. I mean, seeing things or understanding themselves, their pain in ways that I've just never seen. And I just wanted to know if you like had any opinions on it or have had clients that have experienced this.
What I think about it from my very basic understanding of it is I think it just like at least shows more how much more willing people are, I think, to explore their traumas and to explore themselves a little bit more. And I do know that it can be extremely helpful for some people to,
Hmm.
like, as you know, how we were talking about various different modalities. I
Yeah.
think the amazing thing about it is that there's so many different ways now we can help ourselves. It doesn't just have to be
Yeah.
go to talking therapy, because that
Yeah.
isn't for everybody.
Right.
And I think it's great that some people are willing to explore it in other ways. And I think if it helps you, if you're doing it in a safe environment and you're not
Mhm.
harming yourself, why not? I'm sort of
Yeah.
all for new ways of helping ourselves.
And it also shows, I think, to what you're doing, it shows that there are so many layers of the subconscious that we have not tapped. And if this
Yeah.
many people are doing this, I mean, she's like 50 people, they're all full grown adults with children,
Hmm.
are doing this because they're seeing a part of their subconscious that they've never seen before that is helping them. It just goes to show that the truth and the power of what you're doing is there because you're working without the drugs, working to really rewire the mind to get down into that subconscious. And I think there's about to be we're already in this revolution of doing that, and you're a pioneer in that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
great. And I think it's so amazing because I used to sort of think that talking therapy was the only way. And there were times in my
Yeah.
life where I was like, I'm at a loss. I don't know how to change this. This keeps happening to me. Or I keep getting myself into these situations. Like mine was romantic relationships, just kept attracting the same type of person again and again and again. And I was like, I am aware, I am dating with intention. What is going on? And
Hmm.
so for me, it was hypnotherapy that helped me, and haven't had that pattern occur since I've had it. And that is like mind blowing to me. It's like magic, but it's just
Hmm.
because I was able to get into the subconscious and dig out
Yeah.
whatever was going on there.
Beautiful. Where can people find you after they watch or listen to this episode?
Sure. So the best place to find me is over on Instagram at Katie Bambrick Coaching. I also have a podcast as well called Do You Even Mind? And Alex is going to come on to my podcast. So maybe by the time this episode comes out, it'll be live. So yeah, those are the best two places to find me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, your time, your energy, your journey. It's been really lovely talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.